Okay, I am very, 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 very late to the party here. But here's the mid-season patch for Overwatch 2. There's a couple reasons why I'm late. I did actually make a video on the day, or at least I recorded a video on the day, reacting to the patch notes, but the first time through, I wasn't satisfied with how it came out. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to go through it again, and this time I'm going to be a bit more planned. And then it went too long. And, I kind of saw that one coming, so I'm like, okay, I'll do a quicker run through. And I completed that quicker run through, edited it together, tried to render it, and my PC crashed. Oh, okay. Tried to render it again, PC crashed. Tried to render it again, PC crashed. So, don't know what's causing that, but for whatever reason, I can't render the version I already recorded. So, now I'm stuck with having to do it this way. I'm just going to start over and see if it still crashes this time, and if you're seeing this video, that means it didn't crash when I tried to render it. Kind of weird that it crashed in the first place, considering I wasn't doing very much super intensive in that video. It was literally just cuts, as you're seeing right now. I've gone through these patch notes already a whole bunch in previous attempts, and no matter what, I can't seem to get this short as I'd like. And I think the big reason for that is because I have to keep bringing up concepts I've already explained and re-explain them. I have already explained them in previous videos, but a lot of these previous videos don't have a lot of views, understandably, because they're very, very long and it's mostly just me talking. So I don't exactly expect them to get as many views. But that obviously means I think, oh god, but I've got to make sure the new people are all caught up in my opinions on this and this and this. I think in this run through, I've just got to cut through the bullshit and just say, sorry, if you don't know what I'm on about here, if you don't feel I've substantiated it, refer to previous videos. With that being said, if you couldn't already tell, this video is not going to be super edited. This is the kind of video I highly recommend that you watch while, I don't know, playing something else. But here is my take on the mid-season patch for Season 8. It's not that different to everyone else's take. I think this patch is dog shit. I'm going to say it straight out. And I think it's important for me to say it straight out like that, because I know that the vast majority of people, that probably isn't super shocking. Oh wow, you called an Overwatch patch dog shit. What a surprise. Clap clap, here's your medal. But in case you haven't seen my patch reviews, which is a decent chance you haven't, I never do this. I very much like to play on the defense, and even when I'm attacking them, I'll acknowledge where they succeeded. I think this is probably the first time I actually just look at this entire patch and I'm like, I just want to slap the dev team in the face and just shout at them, what do you think you're doing? Because the decisions made in this patch genuinely seem like they could only be logically justified with either completely disconnected from reality, scatterbrain logic, or if this patch is just them sleepwalking through the balance of the game and just making changes based on stats while not taking into account at all player opinion or just generally other broader concerns with the game that are a bit more complicated than a win rate percentage. So, let me quickly go through the changes first, because I'm going to have a lot to say about each one. Malga received a huge swath of nerfs because of the fact that he was apparently intended to be nerfed before they left for Christmas, but the hotfix system failed again. What, is this the third time now that they've said they were supposed to be nerfed at a certain point and then the hotfix system failed? I think it's the third time. Either way, because that happened, we were stuck with overpowered Malga for far longer than the devs ever intended, and they said, okay, we're going to make the nerfs even harsher now because of the fact you've been stuck with OP Malga for a while. And the way they put it is that while new heroes release on the safe side of strong, we want this version of Malga to end up on the safe side of weak after we apply these changes. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think they quite did that, but we'll get back to that. Orisa, I literally did a double take and spat out my drink. When I read this, I thought there is no way this is what I think it is. There is some way I must be misunderstanding this patch note. But no, there was no misunderstanding. They decided to completely remove damage fall off from Orisa's weapon so that she still does maximum damage even from like 60 meters away. So yes, Orisa is now fucking sniper tank. You can be like, literally, I dueled an Ashe on Numbani, who was literally like 50 miles away, and I just won the duel. Literally my first game on this buffed Orisa, I managed to spawn kill a Zenyatta on Saravasa while standing on the first point. That's the level of range we're talking about on a tank that already deals enormous amounts of damage, which is hilarious. And they also decided to remove the interaction where Malga used to be able to headshot through Orisa's Fortify by using the right-click gun, and now he can't anymore. Roadhog lost 50 HP from his Take a Breather, and now his Take a Breather has breaks of 1.5 per second in between uses rather than 1 second. Sojin had her Railgun charge buffed so that it no longer goes lower than 25 when it starts decaying. Sombra got a bunch of quality of life changes to her stealth. Anna got a nerf to Bionade duration. Ilari got a bunch of quality of life changes for the most part and a small buff. Generally, these are all buffs, but a lot of them are more quality of life. Primary Fire still charges while you're healing, which it used to be paused while healing. Same goes for using the ultimate. She's got 2 more bullets in a clip now. Her ultimate now fully refills her heal beam, and her ultimate now has no damage fall off. When before, the further away they were from the center, the less damage the initial impact would do. But even still, it's only 50 damage at max, so it's not a whole lot of damage. Lastly, Lifeweaver got a bunch of quality of life changes, but for the most part, nothing all that important. Okay, so let me cross off the ones that don't matter to start. Roadhog. I'm not saying this nerf literally doesn't matter, but it's not super impactful, and I don't really want to talk about it too much. I will say this is actually technically one of the few changes that's more reasonable. I think reducing this by 50 health is fine. It's very small, but it's warranted. The increased cooldown feels like it's just going to be clunky, but yeah, we crossed that one off. Let's also cross off the Sombra changes, because don't get me wrong, they're nice, but they really are extremely minor quality of life changes to make stealth feel more smooth, so we'll cross that one off. We can also cross off the Lifeweaver changes, because they are absolutely irrelevant, and the Ilari changes you can kind of half cross off, because they are relevant, because there's so many of them mostly, but most of them aren't super huge. When you do all that, you realize that there are only 4.5 characters that have actually been changed in this patch. Now, why does that matter? It matters because everyone who is still playing Overwatch right now desperately wants a shake-up. That's just... Obviously, there's more specific things, but, like, if I get into specifics, well, I have specifics. Well, I have a prescription for what Overwatch should be like and where it needs to go. I understand that then it sounds a little bit like I'm saying, wah, the devs won't do exactly what I want. And I get that it can't always be like that. I don't even want them to do exactly what I want. I would like that. But before even that, bare basics, what everyone wants is a shake-up. No one likes the state of the game right now. No one. And so I genuinely could not be disappointed with this patch so long as it did the bare minimum and shook things up a bit. But in the end, they decided, during a time in which more people are more desperate for the game to change than ever before, after what feels like over half a year straight of the Season 6 meta. Yes, there's been slight shifts. Orisa got replaced with Sigma, and now it's going back to Orisa because she got buffed again. Mauga came in and came out. Bastion got phased out for Sojourn. But overall, the extremely bunkery, extremely brain-dead comps are still the ones that rule competitive. Overall, people still aren't happy with the state of the game, and the problems that are causing people to be unhappy are the exact same problems we had all the way back in Season 6. They haven't changed, they haven't even phased out of existence for a brief period, they've just stayed and rotted and become worse and still not been addressed. This patch could have been, hey, we're just going to pick 5 characters at random to giga buff and, like, nuke a couple characters at random. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that would be a good patch, but that would unironically be better than this patch. Because even if that patch made the game awfully balanced, they made it so temporarily those 5 characters or so were, like, auto picks, you were throwing the game if you weren't picking them, and the characters that got nuked were, like, literally if you play them, you're throwing. Even if that was the case, at least we would be playing a different game for a bit. At least the meta would be a little bit more bearable. At least it would be something new. That would unironically genuinely be a less painful experience than what we got. But beyond that, there's another reason why these patch notes feel absolutely barren, and I couldn't put my finger on it for days. And then it clicked. Hang on a minute. There's no dev comments in this patch. I kept asking myself after reading every change, what the fuck are they thinking? What is the logic behind this? And then realizing, hang on a minute, they're supposed to be telling us that, right? They're supposed to be leaving notes to say, this is the logic behind this change. This actually feels like a time in which that would be really, really useful, because I look at almost every one of these changes and think, I don't even know how you would begin to construct the rationale for making a change like this. But beyond that, okay, let's go back and go one by one. The Mauga nerfs. Okay, this is probably unironically, this is probably the best part of the entire patch, and it's still not even that great. I do not like the way they went about nerfing Mauga. Essentially, the way that they had to nerf Malga was to reduce his armor. I'm not going to say that'd be a perfect solution, but I would argue there is no even close to perfect solution with Malga because of how fundamentally awfully designed he is. And I'm not going to start the argument about that because one, video length, and two, I know that 90% of you already agree with me, considering it's not exactly a hot take to say that Malga is one of the worst designed tanks ever added to the game. I guess all I could add is a little bit of a I told you so, considering I kind of saw this coming all the way back when he was trialed, and I couldn't believe that most people seem to be saying all good things about him when I was like, isn't this just Orisa 2.0 but even worse? Either way, I'm glad that Malga's being nerfed, but as I say, I don't like the way they went about it. I think that he needed a big reduction in armor. I feel like the main reason that Malga took over, and this is part of why Malga's so poorly designed, is that Malga fundamentally can only ever be a character that is stupidly overpowered when he's allowed to be, but absolutely useless when people are actually doing things to shut him down. And while that's not healthy, that is literally the single most healthy point Malga can ever be at with the horrible way he's designed. And so if that's the world we're forced to live in, the best possible scenario is simply to have Malga be a character that steamrolls when he's not countered, but gets destroyed when he's countered. And of course, the best thing that you can hope to do to counter Malga is to play Ana and sleep and anti him. Here's the problem with that. Once they gave him that armor boost from the last buff, his effective HP became so high that essentially Anti no longer really counted him. Don't get me wrong, it was kind of your best bet, so I still think you should have antied him. But like, God, the amount of times I swapped Ana against a Malga and still lost because I just keep antiing him and he just simply does not die until the anti is already worn off. So reducing his armor, I honestly think, would have been the only change they needed to make. However, they went way too soft here. Only 50 armor. He needed to lose a lot more than that. 100 minimum, 150 ideally. Reducing the ammo of his chain gun is fine. I kind of prefer it at 300 to 350. The lifesteal change could have mattered if it was actually a significant reduction, but 70% to 60% is nothing. I must admit I probably split away from the crowd a little bit on this take, but I don't even think the cooldown increase on Cardiac Overdrive matters all that much. In my experience, honestly, Overrun is a better tanking tool anyway, considering you have more damage reduction than Fortify while using Overrun, and Overrun comes up every 6 seconds. Personally, that's how I play Malga at least. I plan to use Overrun as my tanking tool, and I leave Cardiac Overdrive as my panic backup button, so that I don't just die and explode when something unexpected happens and I get caught out. As a result, I don't really think the cooldown change matters that much, unless you play Malga dumb. Then it probably matters a lot more if you're too trigger happy on using your Cardiac Overdrive when you don't need to. Cage Fight still grants him a free reload when he uses it, but it doesn't give him infinite ammo. However, with how much 300 ammo is, it's still enough that it effectively is still kind of like infinite ammo, because you still get to shoot non-stop during the entire cage fight. The only difference is now when the cage fight is over, you might actually have to reload instead of still having a full clip. Lastly, his passive where he gets overhealth for landing headshots had its conversion rate reduced so it gives less overhealth. Yeah, this is a very bad approach in my opinion. This is, instead of actually identifying the issue with him, let's just scattershot, tiny nerf everything he has. And that not only kind of makes things messy, but also I feel like just genuinely doesn't address the problem. Berserker is one of the only things in his kit that actually rewards you for trying to do something skillful. And yet, we're nerfing it because we're just nerfing everything, which to me kind of comes off as a sign like you don't know what the problem is, so you're just going to scattershot hit everything. And the worst part is, people have been saying this is the nerf to kill Malga. I'm not going to lie, I don't agree. I know that not everyone is in agreement. There are one or two people who are like, I don't know if this kills him, but I don't think Malga's dead. In fact, the first game I played Malga after this nerf, I didn't want to play too many games because it's Malga, you know. I don't like bullying other people, and I don't even like playing Malga, but I did want to know what he felt like after the nerfs, and well, my first game on him after he got nerfed, I went 27-1 and stomped the game despite the fact they were running 4 counters. I was going up against a Sigma, a Mei, a Bastion, and an Ana, and the only thing on the enemy team that wasn't fucking me was their Mercy. And despite that, I still went 27-1 and absolutely stomped them. And it's not like I did anything skillful or cool or anything. I basically just sat behind cart, and whenever they went to contest cart, I would walk out from behind it and hold left click and right click on them until they died. And then, when they tried to wall me and kill me with Bastion, like, turret form while I'm walled off from my team, I just hit Overrun. And then, if I get caught without Overrun, I just hit Cardiac Overdrive. I think these nerfs do something, and that is, I think that now, if you truly were brainless with Malga, if you truly have no idea how to play tank and you were just playing Malga to farm free wins, I think now you get fucked. However, I think if you have even basic tank game sense, Mauga is still extremely overpowered. However, I do not think at the very least it's going to be a Mauga meta. But don't breathe a sigh of relief yet, because the reason it's not going to be a Mauga meta is because it's going to be an Orisa meta. Now, it used to be that, in my opinion, Orisa was actually the single worst tank you could pick to fight Mauga. Because essentially, Orisa would just try and do everything Mauga already does, only Mauga would be better at it. Orisa does a lot of damage, but Mauga does more. Orisa's got a lot of survivability when she has her buttons up, but Mauga has even more when he has his buttons up. Orisa's got poor mobility, but Mauga's is at least a little bit better than hers. Orisa's got a garbage ultimate, and Mauga's got an amazing ultimate. One of the only advantages she had is that since she had a lot of damage mitigation tools, that would reduce the lifesteal that Mauga would get. But the fact that Mauga could headshot you through Fortify meant that he could still get overhealth off of you, and the fact that you're such a big fat easy target would kind of offset all the health regeneration he wouldn't get when you were using abilities. Essentially, literally the only thing you beat the Mauga on as Orisa is that you did have more CC. Other than that, though, you were absolutely outmatched in all aspects, and while you could go toe-to-toe with him for a little bit, you would always lose that fight in the long run. Because if you were playing another tank, you might have been able to use your mobility to outsmart him, or maybe some other abstract value only you give on that character, but because you're playing Orisa, you don't do anything that Mauga doesn't, except CC. So you just lose. However, now the matchup's completely different. Now, Orisa can do maximum damage to you without getting in your face, so they don't let you hold both left click and right click at once. As well as that, now that your Fortify actually works against Mauga without letting him get headshots, that now means that both of Orisa's buttons deny him both lifesteal and overhealth, which means that now when Orisa uses either of her buttons, she not only stays alive herself, but denies Mauga's survival tools. Now, Orisa bullies Mauga. So all we've done is replaced the new Mauga with the old Mauga, or I guess Orisa 2.0 with Orisa 1.0. However you want to put it, Orisa and Mauga are essentially the same character, only I'd actually argue that Mauga's so terribly made, I actually think Orisa is better. Because at least with Orisa, there's at least some room for the occasional creative play with the knockback of spears or javelin spin to maybe get someone off the map, or just in a position where they don't have line of sight to something to deny some kind of cooldown. Whereas with Mauga, it's literally just holding left click and right click. Either way, Orisa is now going to win every matchup with every single fucking tank in the game for the most part, and the only tank that can actually keep her in a check anymore is Zarya, and I hope to God Zarya doesn't end up being prevalent, because Jesus Christ, I don't think there's a tank in this game I hate more than Zarya. Well, except maybe Mauga, but honestly I'm still making up my mind on that. I still don't know if I hate Mauga or Zarya more. Decisions. Do we hate the meat bag more, or do we hate the fun police more? The Orisa meta is more hard locked in as well because of the fact that all the good tanks right now also get countered by Orisa for the most part. Mauga countered by Orisa. Roadhog, honestly I would have argued reworked Roadhog doesn't even get close to countered by Orisa and shits on Orisa, but now that Orisa can just fight at a distance where the Roadhog can't do any damage and she can still do maximum damage with the fall off change, I actually think it now reverts back to Orisa shits on Roadhog. Especially because you have more than enough tools to keep the Roadhog away, even if he does try and get close. Then there's the Sojourn buff. I don't even think I have anything of substance to add here. Just what? What? So, for the uninformed, Sojourn is literally the best DPS in the game. That's hardly even an opinion at this point. Okay, yeah, she does a little bit worse at lower ranks, and she's still, the best DPS in the game. And at a time, too, where I would say genuinely, I'm going to say it, I'm not a DPS player, but so far as I've seen, I think I agree with the idea that DPS has become fucking cosmetic. The caveat being that there are a couple DPS that you can pick to not be cosmetic. The problem being that it's not that many DPS you can pick to not be useless to your team, and if you don't pick just those DPS, then yeah, you're pretty useless. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of, depending on the situation, you can be important on this DPS, but if we're talking all maps, for the most part, I really think those DPS are literally just Sojourn and Mei, and if you want to play any other DPS, unless you're fucking insane on them and land nothing but headshots, yeah, you're gonna be useless. Of course, there's a bunch of map-specific exceptions, or team comp-specific exceptions, but if you're talking, I want to play this DPS every game on just about every map, yeah, it's Sojourn or Mei or you throw. Even Sombra, who I think is one of the DPS that's doing better right now, if they've just got a really bunkery comp with some really high health supports, I just think Sombra's useless. And so it seems really tone deaf to me during a time where DPS has never felt anywhere near this useless to take the best DPS in the game, one of the only ones that's thriving at all in this environment, and give them even more buffs. And then also give some extremely irrelevant quality of life changes to one of the few DPS that is just barely surviving. Meanwhile, the rest of the DPS, which are just a corpse with flies around them in the corner, gets nothing. I can't do the Ana change. Let's do the Ana change last. Okay, the Lifeweaver changes are the same, pretty irrelevant. If anything, this is a bad change, because while it's good for the Lifeweaver, this just removes even more counterplay and makes it even more brainless to play Lifeweaver. And again, I don't like how brainless they've made Lifeweaver through buffs. Either way, Illari. I actually think these changes are technically good, but they came at the worst possible time. You see, I spent a while trying to solidify my opinion on Illari. I struggled a lot to figure out whether she was good or not, because I would only ever get very polarized results, and a lot of the time I would feel like it was hard to judge. It felt like the success I got on Illari wasn't proportional to the effort I put in. It felt like there was some other pattern, but I couldn't tell what the pattern was. And eventually I came to the conclusion, and it sounds really simple and like I should have came to it way earlier, but it's one of those things you just don't see in gameplay very easily. You only see it in hindsight when you actually look at which games you won, which games you lost, and what the scoreboard looked like on those games. I think obviously skill does matter on Illari, but honestly, it's genuinely less about skill and more about team comp. If the enemy team is playing a more pokey comp, or even maybe a more rushy kind of comp, if they're not playing something that's very divey, then you're fine. You're actually going to do amazing on Illari, because if you can simply place a healing pylon and not have to move it every fucking 5 seconds because someone's going to break it, then that means that you are now playing 6v5. You're playing with a team of 1 tank, 3 DPS, and 2 supports. You're the third DPS, and that pylon is the second support. And that sounds like a joke, but genuinely, if I have a game where there's like an enemy Doomfist diving me constantly that literally never lets me place a pylon, no matter how hard I try, I will have like 2,000, maybe 3,000 healing by the end of that game. Whereas if I simply have a game where I get to place a pylon, and stuff doesn't move that much, and there's no one diving our backline, and our pylon just sits there and heals people, I will get 9,000 healing. So yes, you quite literally turn the game into a 6v5 in your favour, so long as you can just put a pylon somewhere and not have to move it every couple seconds. And in that situation, Illari is overpowered in a very subtle way, where she doesn't do that much that's like, that's fucking bullshit. Like, I know a lot of people like to say the amount of damage she does is bullshit, but honestly, considering how slow she shoots, and considering she needs 2 headshots in a row to 2-tap, I think that's pretty reasonable. It only becomes stupid when I realise that gets combined with the fact that, invisibly, while you can't even see it, on the other side of the map, she's also technically currently healing someone, giving them effectively a mercy beam just because there's a pylon near them. Once you realise that Illari is essentially being a mercy and a Cass all in one character, then you realise, that might be the OP part. Anyway, I think that if we were going into a dive meta, these would be great changes. The problem is, we're not. Doom, for the longest time, has been the only dive tank that is surviving the cruel conditions the game has been in. And what keeps Doomfist in check? Orisa and Roadhog. And even Roadhog, I feel like Roadhog is a rough matchup, but you can still win that. Orisa as Doomfist, unless there is a massive skill gap and you are just tons better than them, that is a situation where you just lose. And look who just got Giga buff this patch. Alright, Orisa. So yeah, we're not going into a dive meta. And you know what Orisa enables? Mostly poke. So, yeah, it looks like we're going into a poke meta, the meta where Illari will already be doing really, really well, and we decided to buff her going into that. Again, I think this is another problem of the devs only looking at statistics and not, like, the broader context. Because here's the thing, I do fully believe that Illari probably was a little bit on the underpowered side in terms of statistics. For as much as people like to call her OP, when I played her in Season 7, she generally felt a little underwhelming a lot of the time, and only felt like she was doing really, really good when I was in a team where I could just sit there a lot of the time and just, you know, not have to move or budge a whole lot. But that's not every game, and because it's not every game, sure, I could fully believe that Illari, like, maybe didn't have the best statistics, actually, and maybe she did need a little bit of a nudge. But if we're going right back into a hard poke meta because we're going to be giga buffing Orisa, then, like, do we need to buff Illari, or won't her win rate just go up anyway because Orisa's everywhere now? But then there's this change. I could spend a million years talking about this change, but let's just shorten it down as much as I can. This change is one of the most disheartening changes I think I've seen. Not because I'm like, oh no, Anna's dead. Oh, I like Anna. Oh, now I'm not going to play Anna. No, this doesn't change anything. I'm still playing Anna. Everyone else is still playing Anna. No one's going to stop playing Anna because of this. Anna isn't going to start losing games because of this. All this means is that, hey, now maybe Malga and Roadhog are going to survive being antied a little bit more often. Which, hey, nice Malga buff you got in there in the Malga killing patch. Either way, this change completely infuriates me for the most part because to me it shows a complete lack of willingness to learn from mistakes. I've said it once and I'll say it again, although I won't explain all over again. Damage and heal power creep, big problem. Literally the reason the game feels awful to play right now on all sides. The reason that the game is balanced in the hugest quotation marks imaginable, where I actually do believe that the win rates probably are pretty even, but that doesn't change the fact that everyone isn't having fun anymore because of the fact the quality of the game has taken a fucking nosedive because we have allowed damage and healing power creep to get out of control to the point at which you no longer win games based on skill, but rather based on which characters you pick and whether you get fucking lucky. It's more about having your fucking buttons available at the right times at the right places rather than actually executing anything difficult. As a result, tanks feel like they either live forever or explode instantaneously. As a result, supports feel like they don't have that much control over the game or anymore because all they can do is hard pocket tank. And hey, they're unkillable, but what's the use of being unkillable if it feels like there's not a whole lot you can do to interact with the game? And DPS are absolutely cosmetic, unless they're killing supports, which they can't because they're fucking unkillable as long as they have their buttons, or harassing the tank. So hey, let's just cause more misery to the tank and play Mei. Damage power creep happens because healing gets power creeped. When there's too much healing, the only way you can kill people is to increase the damage. So they increase the damage. But then because they increase the damage, you have to increase the healing. And because they increase the healing, they increase the damage. And this goes on forever. And so the only thing you have to cut through this game and make it somewhat sane again is anti-nade. To say, okay, that's enough fucking healing. Now you die when you get shot too much, not when your supports run out of buttons. That is, unless their support has Suzu, that button in particular might make you still live. Or Immortality Field, or Life Grip, you know. But either way, for the most part, anti-nade acts as the only end to this fucking madness. I'll say it once and I'll say it again. Anti-nade is not the problem, healing is the problem, and anti-nade is the only solution. And the only reason it's a problem in the first place is it's because it's a solution that only 1 out of the 39 characters in this game has. So if you're not on support, have fun not being able to use anti-nade and only be able to get kills if someone is caught completely out of position in an unlivable area, or if you one-shot someone, because if they are ever within line of sight of their supports, no matter how much damage you do to someone, you will never be able to kill them. Not without an anti-nade. This change pisses me off because I said in my last video that was on one of these patches that it literally does not matter how much you nerf anti-nade. Doesn't it strike you as a little bit fucking weird that anti-nade wasn't OP when it dealt 100 damage on impact, had an 8-second cooldown, had a 5-second duration, also healed 100 health instead of 60, and on top of that you got twice as much ult charge for healing? Isn't it a little bit fucking strange that end of Overwatch 1 Anna had all those stats, and yet she wasn't OP? Friendly reminder, end of Overwatch 1, sure most of you weren't aware, Anna actually wasn't meta. She was kind of meh, to be honest. The meta was Brig Zen, and even if you weren't running Brig Zen, you would want to run Bat before you'd run Anna. And yet, since then, Anna has received, quite literally, 0 buffs that haven't been reverted, except one literally meaningless quality of life change, where the size of her bullets went from, get this, only when unscoped by the way, didn't change it when scoped, only when unscoped, the size of her bullets went from 0 to 0.1. What does that mean? It means that the size of the bullets went from literally nothing, so you literally had an infinitely small dot that you had to hit on the enemy, to, no joke, 10 times smaller than Alari's bullets when she came out. And again, this is only when shooting unscoped shots. The scoped shots are unchanged. Other than that, Anna has received 0 buffs that haven't been reverted a patch later in the entirety of Overwatch 2's history, and a ceaseless onslaught of nerfs to all of her cooldowns, to her primary fire, and to her ult charge gain. And yet despite that fact, the broken version of Anna from the end of Overwatch 1 was a meh support. And yet, current Overwatch 2 Ana, after being stomped into the ground over and over and over with more nerfs every single patch, they can't seem to go a patch without trying to nerf Ana again. Despite how much they try and stomp her into the ground like a cockroach, she comes crawling back every time. A permanently S-tier support. Only ever really weak at the start of the game's life when it was more healthy. And people misdiagnose that. People say, damn, Ana kind of sucked at the start of Overwatch 2, but she's so broken now even though she's been nerfed and continues to be nerfed. Man, it must be because anti-nade needs to be reworked, and it's because it's such a poorly designed ability. But again, let's remember the fact that anti-nade has existed in Overwatch since, I don't know, literally the beginning. We're talking about someone who's been here from the beginning, and only now are we going, maybe anti-nade's a problem. The fact that it took us that long to start thinking this should maybe signal that anti-nade isn't a problem, and that something else triggered this. And, spoilers, I think that something else might be the fact that healing is through the fucking roof right now, and so of course anti-nades are going to be insanely effective if healing is insanely effective right now. Way more effective than it ever should have been allowed to be. And to be clear, adding more healing to the game is adding more misery to the game. You can have characters that heal more than others, but at the end of the day, healing is intentionally made to be low skill. There are examples of slightly more high-skill healing, like with Ana and Baptiste, but as a general rule, healing is pressing a button. The vast majority of the time, support's healing methods are brainless, because that's not the hard part of support, and it's not supposed to be. So, let me ask you, why are we deciding to reward supports for doing the most brainless part of their kit more than we reward them for actually doing challenging things? Why is it more rewarding to heal bot people than to actually make plays? Why do we make it so that healing in this game is not only easier than dealing damage, but also that you can deal out healing substantially faster than anyone can deal out damage? These should be some things to consider. I said it in my last patch review, and I'll say it again. You could nerf Bionade to 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second duration. It literally doesn't matter. I mean this sincerely. I won't pretend that 1 second duration wouldn't reduce the effectiveness of the character, but I mean this 100% sincerely. If you reduce anti-heal to 1 second duration, people will still play Ana. Roadhogs will still explode when they get antied, even if anti only lasts for 1 second. People will still play Ana. You can't fix this by reducing the duration. And again, I wouldn't be so mad about this if this is the first time. I'd be like disappointed that they're doing this, but I'd be like, okay, right, well, sure, we can try it and see how it pans out. But like, Jesus Christ, man. Is this like the 9th Biotic Grenade nerf in a row we're on? Like, am I going to be sitting here in a year's time reading the patch notes and see Ana, Biotic Grenade, effect duration reduced from 1.75 seconds to 1.625 seconds? Don't worry, guys, one more Biotic Grenade nerf. Don't worry, I know that Biotic Grenade nerf number 27 didn't do it, but Biotic Grenade nerf number 28, don't worry, guys, we're going to fix Ana. Like, just Jesus, when does it finally click? Maybe we're doing the wrong thing here. Maybe we're looking at the wrong place for the issue. A lot of you already know, but for those of you who joined a little bit later, my ambitions with Overwatch have been a bit all over the place. I was actually one of the few who was very hopeful for Overwatch 2. I think this game is insanely fun when there isn't things actively ruining it. And while that sounds like an obvious thing to say, what I mean by that is they don't even have to go above and beyond, in my opinion. They don't have to make their hero releases staggering. They don't have to make the new maps the best maps I've ever played. If they just add new content to the game that is at least okay, at a steady pace, while also making sure the game doesn't go into an extremely unhealthy meta, that bare minimum effort is already enough, in my opinion, to make this the greatest game I've ever played. The problem is, this is the greatest game I've ever played at its best, but most of the time it's not at its best. At a good 90% of the time, something is terribly wrong, whether it be game-breaking bugs or a meta that makes people want to commit self-die. This is why I genuinely, unironically, sincerely believe that Overwatch 2 Season 3, despite being an off-season and the first season of the game where we didn't get a new hero, which had very little new content, despite all of that, was the single best period of Overwatch I have ever played. Because you know what? Yeah, maybe there wasn't a whole lot of new content, but you know what else? The game was in a healthy meta, in a healthy state, with very few bugs. Every single character in the game was competitively viable. If you were good with the character, you could rank up with them and you could win. There were characters that performed better than others, but no one was really a throw pick. Even the quote-unquote meta tank of Season 3, Orisa, wasn't even really the meta tank. They were just the popular pick because they were the easy way to win if your opponents didn't really have the skill to counter you. And while this might sound unhinged and cope coming from me now in the current day, going back through the annals of history, transporting you back a whole year back to Season 3, actually, back then, you could fucking dive and kill supports without dying yourself and without first having to force out 8 different cooldowns to have a chance. Back then, if you played a dive tank and you jumped on the Ana that the enemy team had, you had a pretty good chance of killing her. And because of that, Orisa was actually unironically counterable back then. Because while she was popular, anyone who had more than a couple brain cells and some good mechanical skill could ignore the Orisa and actually kill the supports. Then the Orisa would explode because she could barely do anything to stop you from diving her supports, and then without her supports, she would absolutely explode because most of what makes Orisa so unkillable is all the damage reduction means that she gets more value out of being healed than any other tank. But if she doesn't get healed, she doesn't get that value. This is why Don't Shoot the Horse is a meme, because that was genuinely the solution before. The solution was, why the hell are you fighting Orisa? That's exactly what the Orisa wants. Jump the supports, then you win. And I can tell you, firsthand, because I did this in Season 3, Orisa was never a problem for me because of that. I never had any trouble against Orisa until Season 6, because by that time, support power creep had hit such a ludicrous amount that no matter how good you were, you couldn't kill supports anymore. Not unless you caught them without their buttons, but what's the only way you can get them to use their buttons? Throwing yourself into their faces and hoping you don't die. Absolutely ridiculous. Either way, back then, the game was in a much better state. And the launch of the game in general was pretty good overall. Obviously, there was tons people were complaining about, but it was the kind of stuff that is mostly just like, on the outside, optically it's bad, but if you're actually playing the game, it's fine. And you know what? Before, I used to say that the way that I feel about Overwatch is that it is clearly a game that has been screwed by Activision. They have done so much to ruin it. And if we're going to name one person in particular, well, obviously it's probably multiple people involved, it's clear to see that Bobby Kotick is probably the single most important person to blame for the failure of Overwatch. However, he's gone now. At the end of this year, he finally left. Overwatch is now owned by Microsoft, and this is what I've been waiting for. This is the day I was getting excited for. Because the second this happened, in my mind a year ago, I thought, that's when the training weights are off. That's when the devs can finally cook. That's when these devs that have constantly shown love and appreciation for the game and constantly shown they know far better what to do with the game than the people who fuck them around, that's when I thought things would get good. The only things that the devs had struggled with in the past that didn't seem to be more of an issue of corporate meddling was balance. But even then, they had done so much better in Overwatch 2 than they did back in Overwatch 1. At least, out the gate they did. Sure, there was always people complaining, and don't get me wrong, there were hiccups. Start of Season 2, it got so bad I actually thought I was going to leave already, only a season in. But then it only took one patch back in Season 2. One patch, and they fixed all the problems with the game, and it's right back to the game being fun again. And again, immediately after Season 2, we get literally the single best period of the game's life in its entirety, Overwatch 1 included. So back then, I thought, okay, we're going to have a rough first year, but the second that Activision is out of the picture and that Bobby's gone, it's all uphill from there. It can only get better. And it's not instantly going to be snap your fingers and everything's perfect, but slowly, more and more things will be added to the game, more and more things will come together, but slowly things are going to get better. And now I'm here. And, God, I don't want to say that I don't believe it anymore, because I don't see a logical reason why things can't get better. But it's just that one thing, isn't it? Balance. I thought they'd learned from the past mistakes. I thought they understood how to balance their game now. I thought, yeah, they had some mistakes in the past. And I thought, well, since the launch of the game, we had half a year of amazing balance overall with only a couple hiccups that were quickly fixed. So, clearly, they must have learned from their mistakes. And then they said, hey, how about we start adding some CC back into the game? And then they said, hey, how about we start increasing some damage numbers and healing numbers even more than they were already ludicrously cranked up? And then they started saying, hey, how about we buff Orisa again? And then they started saying, hey, how about we buff Bastion again? And slowly, everything's crumbled. Genuinely, Season 4 onwards, it feels like it's not even the same dev team. It feels like, Jesus Christ, or at least balance team, the decisions seem incoherent. At least Season 4, because it had only just begun, the game was still pretty fun, but it wasn't long afterwards that everything started crumbling and falling apart. And it didn't have to be this way. They seem to have learned from their mistakes the first 3 seasons, but something just went wrong in Season 4. And I'm just left here thinking, did they learn from their mistakes? It seems ludicrous for me to say they just had 3 seasons straight of just being lucky, but what else am I supposed to take from this? I feel like there is no way the same team that wrote these patch notes in front of us right now wrote the patch notes for the first 3 seasons. So I guess that's why I'm so uncertain about the game right now. Because logically, I think, yeah, eventually the balance is going to get better, and once it's better, it's all uphill from there. But then emotionally, right now, I think, well, right now the game has never felt more dead to play. Like, whenever I've said dead game before, I've said it kind of facetiously because I've always thought it's kind of dumb. Like, I play Evolve, that's a real dead game. You know, when I look at Overwatch, it's like, don't get me wrong, you know, it's certainly suffering and it's not doing as well as it should, but to call it a dead game is clearly incorrect. And while I'm not saying it is dead now, Jesus Christ, even as a regular player of the game now, it does feel dead right now. It feels like a fucking zombie. Right now, you will get in lobbies pretty quick, and they will have 10 players, but it won't feel like it. There'll be levers, a whole bunch of them, a lot of them right now, and then you won't get a backfill because the backfill system broke, and in fairness, this patch apparently fixed that, apparently. There's a lot more people just not bothering. There's a lot more people who just fuck around and do dumb shit on purpose because they don't really care about trying to help their teammates anymore or play the game properly. There's a lot of people who'll just create alt accounts and troll now, because what else is there to do? And there's a lot of people sincerely trying to play the game, but they just really like one character, and they want to play that one character, no matter how useless they are in this situation. And it's not exactly controversial to say that the current state of Overwatch has made it so certain characters with certain team comps in certain maps aren't just bad, but they may as well literally not even be in the game, they're that useless to you. It's so deflating getting into a lobby where it's watch point Gibraltar attack, and my tank picks Reinhardt because they're a Reinhardt one-trick, and I already know the game is lost. And I mean, I'm not going to flame him. It's not his fault that the game's like that, but that is the way the game is. And so if they decide they're going to play Matt Reinhardt and that's who they want to play, they're going to lose. It's not even really a question. It's just going to happen. Meanwhile, other people in the lobby will flame him for picking Reinhardt, so this poor guy who just wants to play Reinhardt is having a miserable time. Then our supports want to play Lucio Alari. Well, wonderful, that's going to go even worse. But hey, once again, they want to play those characters, and they should be able to if they want to, but again, unfortunately, they just can't if they want to win. And meanwhile, our Junkrat's AFKing in the corner, the game starts, and he gets kicked for being AFK. It just feels like a lot of games are like this now. Like, way more than before. And even when a game isn't like this, Jesus Christ, it was always true, but it keeps getting worse and worse every day that passes. The second that either team loses one support, the entire team crumbles. Until that happens, no one dies. I have seen entire games where there is clearly a skill disparity between one team and another, and yet the team that is clearly playing worse wins just because the other team gets a support who AFKs the first team fight and they get staggered so hard they never regroup until they've already lost. I don't think I have ever joined so many games of Overwatch in a row, ever, and instantly known, oh, it's over, and just had to sit there and play it out so many times. And again, I'm not saying be toxic, I'm not saying flame people for fucking you over, I don't do that, and I don't say anyone else should. I'm just saying it sucks. Especially when I have Q tank and I want to play someone like Doomfist and I want to really try hard and work with my team. It's really disheartening when I lock Doomfist and then I see other people lock characters which essentially signal they're throwing. And again, I don't even think that's their fault. I think that's the game's fault that they create loads of characters that are just throw picks in certain situations. Or it's really disheartening when we do pick the right characters and I get excited because it's like, oh yes, fucking finally! Finally, I get to have a Roadhog game with Kiriko Lifeweaver, the perfect support duo. And then I see our Kiriko AFK, and I'm like, Oh my god, I was about to have a fun game and now our support's going to be AFK for the whole first team fight. So we're going to be playing 4v5, then they're going to get kicked, then we're going to have to wait another team fight for someone to come back in, and then we'll finally get our backfill, and then, like, it will just be a fucking mess and we'll just be staggered until we lose. And the second support that joins late won't even be able to, like, recover the game before we're already dead. This is just miserable. And that's just how the game feels right now. That feels like your average game of Overwatch at the current moment. And this isn't just my opinion, I understand this is a bit of a rant and it could sound like it's just one random disgruntled guy, but go ask other people in the community. Everyone is unanimously saying right now they've never felt more sick of Overwatch. Even people who play it all day, every day. And the one thing, while everyone has different takes on it, that everyone seems to be saying is just simply that the quality of games has plummeted. And you know what? I fully fucking agree. And you know what? While there are other things to blame here, I think it's pretty safe to say that healing and damage power creep is the source of like 90% of these problems. At the very least, it's a contributing factor to basically every problem with the game right now. Genuinely, while I have much more solutions which I think would be much better, a lot of the better solutions are complicated and way too long for a video like this. Do you want to hear a dumb, easy solution, which, don't get me wrong, is not the perfect solution, but unironically would be stupid, dummy easy and would instantly make this game 50 times more enjoyable? If I woke up tomorrow and I see patch notes, all damage dealt by all heroes and all abilities reduced by 40%, all healing dealt reduced by 50%. No consideration for breakpoints, no consideration for special interactions, just reduce the numbers of all damage and all healing. That would, no joke, be a better balanced patch than any patch we have seen in the last year. Because you know what? That might break some breakpoints. It might make some characters temporarily a little bit too weak. It might make some characters temporarily a little bit too strong. But it would make the game fun. Right now, the game is, in huge quotation marks, balanced. But the game is not fun. And that is a much bigger problem than it not being balanced. I guess to end this off, another reason I'm very scared is because I made a prediction. I made this prediction during Season 7, but I guess the first proof of it I have is the mid-season, even though I did it at the start of Season 7, because I didn't put it in a video until the mid-season patch. I predicted that we're in the dark ages of Overwatch 2. You know, we thought launch was going to be the worst of it, but launch wasn't actually that bad in my opinion. Now we're experiencing the worst of it. And the hope is that things will get better. If they don't get better, then this game might unironically die. But if things get better, this is the Dark Ages. This is the worst it gets. The question is, when do the Dark Ages end? I can say when they begin. They began in Season 6, arguably even Season 5. I will admit I didn't play Season 5, because after the PvE news, and after seeing that Season 5 literally brought nothing new to the table for an entire season, not even a map, which, by the way, they promised each off-season would at least have a new map, and they didn't do that for Season 5. But it doesn't matter too much. The main point is Season 5, Season 6, whichever one you want to say, was the start. What's more important is the end. I can't say what the end is, but I did make a prediction. And it was an educated guess, not just a pull-it-out-my-ass number. I felt like there was an outside optimistic chance it could be Season 9, but I felt it'd be more likely to be Season 10, maybe even Season 11 if we're being pessimistic. Here was the logic, and this was before I even knew Mauga was going to be the new tank. The logic was, okay, tank feels fucking awful right now. And it feels fucking awful because of how much damage and healing power creep is in the game. It affects all the roles in the game, it makes everyone miserable, but it's probably most easily felt on tank. And at the time, I'd recently heard on the Group Up podcast a point that I hadn't actually thought about, which was really profound, honestly. That, honestly, every tank in the game is underpowered was the argument, essentially. That Sigma was a character that beforehand we were looking at maybe needing buffs, and before we know it, he's the hard meta tank, just because he's the tank who can take the most punishment while not dying, not even for his ability to actually make plays. Like, let's be real, was Sigma the meta tank in Season 7 because, man, his rock was just that good and his ult was amazing? No, Sigma was the meta tank in Season 7 because the only way you could survive as tank was if you had a shield, a grasp, and a stun at the same time to do as much damage mitigation as possible. And so if Sigma, a tank that we were looking at maybe needing buffs back in Season 3, Season 4, became a tank that was now hard meta, that's maybe an indication not that Sigma became stupid overpowered, but rather an indication that every other tank in the game had become so useless that Sigma was genuinely, no joke, one of the best options you had left, and now was being considered for more nerfs, which he did get, by the way. So my logic was, okay, they clearly aren't learning them from their mistakes. They clearly aren't learning how they've ruined tank, and how they're going to ruin everyone else as a result in the long run. But they're going to have to realize eventually. My thought was, Season 8, we get a new tank. They're not going to have learned by Season 8. Season 7, they're going to, do a bunch of nothing burger patches that don't fix anything, band-aid solutions, easy, lazy solutions, and not really substantially fix anything. I didn't even predict the support nerf patch, but you know what? That's so on the nose, isn't it? Because they all dusted off their hands and moved on the second the support nerf patch was over, after not having really fixed anything. Technically, I guess they brought this power level of supports a bit more in line, but they didn't bring the fun policing levels of supports in line. They identified the problem as the fact that supports had their buttons too often. Not that supports had buttons that oftentimes took zero skill to use, and at the press of a button would completely deny a kill no matter the circumstances, which kind of isn't really fair, considering usually the person trying to get the kill is demonstrating a million times more skill than the support is by pressing a single button. They identified the problem not as these buttons being too easy to use, not as supports being unkillable, not as that supports get too much free value and not enough ability to make risky plays of their own, but rather that supports had those buttons too often, so we'll just make them have it less often. This didn't solve the problem, and it was a lazy band-aid solution which didn't substantially address anything. What a surprise, I was dead on the nose. My next prediction was that Season 8 would come along, and because they haven't substantially addressed anything, the new tank they release in Season 8 would be dog shit, at least initially. And of course, then we got the Mauga trial, and while people made a big noise about him, statistically he actually performed quite poorly in those trials. So while I won't pretend that I knew they were going to release a character like Mauga or anything, I didn't realize it was going to be such a polarizing free win or free lose character, overall that averages out to me being correct. He lost more games than he won and he needed buffs after that. So once again, I'm dead on the money. They're going to realize, oh shit, this character is awful. But, they're so strong, how can they be awful? Damn, guess we're going to have to giga buff him to make sure that he's actually played. He's the new tank after all, we can't have him being bad. And remember the Mauga patch that made him broken where they gave him all that armor? Once again, dead on the fucking money. Then comes the scary part. The part where I started being wrong. Because this is the end of the prediction. I thought they're going to try giga buffing this tank, which they did. And then that tank is going to take over the meta, which they did. And because they take over the meta, while it's awful balance-wise, it'll at least shake things up. And that was where I was wrong. Because Mauga ended up just being another Orisa. So essentially we just got a retread of Season 6. Only now we're running Sojourn instead of Bastion, and we're running Mauga instead of Orisa. But it's still the same bullshit. And then I thought, well, because balance is going to be so awful, and they're going to have this predicament, it's like, wow, this tank has to be this overpowered for them to be playable, but then they break the game when we make them this overpowered. What happened here? Something's clearly wrong. And I was really hoping this would be the turning point. At least the beginning of it. My hope was that by the mid-season of Season 8, they'd be looking at this new tank and being like, we kind of fucked up here. But how? What went wrong? And I was hoping by then they would be forced to realize it wasn't a problem with the character they had released, but rather a problem with the whole state of the game. And while I didn't expect them to have figured everything out instantly about what they should do from there, which is why I felt like it would be optimistic to say Season 9 would be when things get fixed, by Season 10 that's 3 patches in the future. That's a lot of chances to get it right. And so that was my thinking. My prediction was, okay, Season 8, they release new tank. Early on, they got to gigabuff him to make him good. The gigabuffed version breaks the game. They realize, oh shit, maybe we've got something fundamentally wrong with the game, not with the character. They start trying to fix it in Season 9, but they don't really know what they're doing yet. They fix it by Season 10. But this is where my prediction starts to go wrong, and that's what's scary. Because of two things. For one, Malga actually is kind of a problem. I maybe had a bit too much faith in the devs, just because the last two tanks they added were Ramatra and Junker Queen. No joke, these two characters I literally think are the two most well-designed tanks of all time. I'm not going to say that they're the most fun, although I do think they're generally really fun. I think probably Doomfist is more fun, but Doomfist kind of poses more awkward questions. And also, Doomfist is technically an Overwatch 2 character, considering, Doomfist was a DPS in Overwatch 1 and completely different. So Tankfist, technically an Overwatch 2 character. So yeah, even the three most fun characters in the game, in my opinion, the three most fun and well-designed tanks in the game, are all products of Overwatch 2. And so I thought they finally understood how to make good tanks. I didn't think they would have such an enormous and obvious flop as Malga, considering the last three tanks they had knocked it out of the fucking park. But that fact muddies the waters, because now they can say, oh, this is just because we failed with Malga. Now they can pretend like all that's wrong is Malga here, and not a wider, bigger problem with the entire game. And they're not realizing the mistakes they've made. They're not coming to realize why the game feels like it's falling apart and dying. And I guess this is just why I'm scared. Because I still do think, at any moment, it literally takes one patch for us to be back to peak Overwatch. It could literally happen at any day, that we could just wake up and there's just a really fucking good balance patch. It's not hard. They just have to be bothered to do it. But that's the problem. They have to be bothered to do it. And if they simply don't ever decide to do the balance patch, we're never going to see the game get better. And I'm scared that all I've been seeing for the past few patches is doubling down and doubling down and doubling down and doubling down on awful, awful, awful decisions. Season 7 mid-season, doubling down on supports having buttons that let them live for free, so instead of trying to take away those buttons and try and give them something that requires more skill, or at least add some challenge to it, no, instead, let's just make it so they have the buttons less and cross our fingers that fixes it. Season 8, start a Season 8 patch. Let's just go for a random scattershot, what the fuck, spin the wheel round of changes, and give Tracer a damage buff because she needs it to survive. And I'm not saying that damage buff was bad, but I'm saying the fact that they needed to give her that damage buff should have raised some alarm, and the fact that they just gave her the damage buff without thinking about it kind of shows their willingness to double down on the damage power creep and heal power creep meta they're creating for themselves. Side note, remember that hilarious brig change from the start of Season 7 where they buffed the damage of her whip shot, which literally the second I saw it, I instantly said, this is an absolute out of nowhere bizarro buff that no one wanted, and they're going to revert this in a few patches, and what do you know, they reverted it at the start of Season 8, because what do you know, it was actually a really fucking bad idea that no one liked. And now here, where we're seeing them doubling down on trying to make Orisa meta. We're seeing them doubling down on refusing to actually substantially nerf or kill off Malga. Where we see them doubling down on asserting we don't see a problem with Sojourn and Mei being the only consistently playable DPS. Where we're seeing them doubling down on we refuse to address healing power creep, we're just going to keep nerfing Bionade and hope eventually it does something. Where we see them doubling down on we want to negate even more counterplay to Lifeweaver to make him even more unkillable through even more methods that have nothing to do with the Lifeweaver's skill and everything to do with him simply having abilities that give him more health for pressing buttons. Let's just make it literally impossible for Reinhardt to shoot Lifeweaver anymore while he's on Petal Platform because now his Fire Strike can't go through it anymore. Yeah, that's a great idea. Keep going, guys. Keep doubling and tripling and quadrupling and pentupling down. Surely eventually the game will just sort itself out. Again, I want to make it clear I'm not giving up on Overwatch because, again, one patch. That's all they need to do. One fucking patch where they screw their heads back on and remember the things they were doing at the start of this game when everyone loved it. One patch is all it takes. They just need to do the fucking patch. And I'm not gonna lie, if that patch doesn't come soon, then I might have to take another hiatus for a bit.